Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on forgotten weapons, or perhaps forgottenoptics.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we have a quickie video on how red dot sights work. So, the modern red dot is a twist on the collimating optic, and that is a technology that's been around for a solid 100+ years. In World War I, both the British and the Germans started working on rudimentary but real and functional collimating optical sights for fighter aircraft, for the machine guns on early fighters. At this point, this sort of sight was fairly large and clunky. It was something that could be used on, say, artillery, perhaps, as well as built into aircraft, but it wasn't small enough to put on individual small arms. That would come several decades later. So let's start with collimating. What these sights all have in common is that they are collimators. All right, so fundamentally, a collimator is a lens, and it's a lens that is specifically curved so that it can take light that comes out of a source here. Light rays are coming out of this thing in all directions, and when they hit the lens, each one is refracted into a parallel beam. So all the light that comes into the lens spread out comes out as a parallel set of light rays. Now, if we build this into an optic, like so, this light is projected this direction towards your eye, back there, and this beam of light is parallel, and you will see it pointing at something down here, let's say a target, like so. There's no actual light projected this way, but what's going to happen is the light coming out the back of this optic hits your eye, so your eye sees this beam of light, and behind it, a target. And that is, well, that's what you're seeing in a red dot optic. What's cool here is if we have this whole thing mounted on a gun, you essentially have a laser pointer coming back at your eyeball that is fixed to the gun. So by moving something, like by moving this sight very minutely on the gun, you can line it up so that this beam of light coming out of the collimating lens, which is actually all this big, is exactly in line with the barrel of the gun, and thus works as a sighting system. Now, that's cool and all, but this is sort of a hypothetical thing. Where does the light come from in a collimating optic? Well, early on, when we're talking about things like early fighter aircraft, you had your tube up here that you looked into, and there was a two-way mirror in it, or reflecting transparent mirror in it, and your light source was actually down below. So you'd have a big block like this, and the pilot's going to look through this thing this direction, and the light goes through a collimating lens down here. And so it all comes up, bounces off of this 90-degree mirror, and comes directly back like that. Now, this was a large and clunky setup, and that's why it doesn't survive. That's why you couldn't mount it on a gun. One of the first places where we see this technology successfully scaled down to small arms is with the Nidar scope from the 1940s, the post-World War II 1940s. And you can see we have all of the relevant elements here. If you look down in there, that is your reticle. It's a little bullseye deal, and this scope does not actually have any built-in light source. It uses light that comes in through this transparent element right here and reflects it up into the lens and then back at the shooter's eye. So if you're using this and you cover this over, the reticle almost completely disappears due to lack of input light that can come up and bounce back to your eyeball. And of course, this does not work at night at all, and it's relatively dim, but it is an early style of collimating sight, or a reflex sight, you might call it. And it does allow you to shoot with both eyes open and have this really cool just bullseye, like an early red dot, put over the top of whatever it is you happen to be looking at. Now, the Nidar was far from ideal. That white reticle is very easily washed out against a lot of backdrops, and it would really be better if you had, say, a red dot that you could see more distinctively. And so that's where we go with really the next commercial development of this sort of technology for small arms. And that is something like the Armson occluded eye gun sight that we have here. So this is essentially half of a modern red dot. It doesn't have its own built-in powered light source, but it has a fiber optic piece in here that gathers light through this, now somewhat yellowed with age, protective shroud, and that fiber optic is what's transmitting light backwards through the optical tube. Now, what makes this half of a red dot is the fact that you can't actually see through it, where in our original diagram, we've got, for example, this thing where it's sending this red dot up into a mirror and then back towards the shooter. Well, the OEG is just this half of it. It's just sending this red spot from the fiber optic back to here as a collimated, there's a lens in here that collimates all of the light coming out of this fiber optic into a single parallel line that comes back. You can zero it by adjusting the lens in there using these two dials, and your brain sees an opaque black surface with a red dot in the middle of it. It is then up to your brain to use the input from your other eye to superimpose the target over the red dot coming out of this thing, hence occluded eye gun sight. One eye is occluded and doesn't have a view of the target. So these are kind of weird to use, but they are functional, and they're a cool piece of technology, and they led to sort of the next generation, something like the Weaver Quick Point here, which is this with a transparent optical section. So in this case, we have essentially the same technology. We have a fiber optic thread up here, goes through a collimating lens right here, turns into a parallel line, which is then reflected down there and then back out to the shooter's eye through this tube, and that tube can be seen through. You can see it's fairly dark there because of the lens coatings to get it to reflect properly. But this gives you sort of the modern, the beginnings of an unpowered red dot sight. So as long as there's enough light coming in to light up this red fiber optic, you will see a red dot when you look through this. And it functions just like that guy, just like that guy. And then what we are going to get to tomorrow is the beginnings of essentially the modern powered red dot, which is the Aimpoint electronic. This is a Mark II. And what makes this different is that it uses an LED, a light-emitting diode, to actually produce light. So this will work in the dark just fine, where these earlier versions required ambient light to create a reticle dot. So there we go. Hopefully I've helped turn the red dot optic from a sort of black box into an understandable piece of technology. And tomorrow we're going to take a look at the first commercially viable red dot optic, which is the Aimpoint electronic. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.